Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Salem. And tonight's question comes to us from Taz 1507. And Taz 1507 asks whether it's possible to artificially create a consciousness through magical means. And the answer to this is absolutely. It's not even an especially uncommon thing, historically speaking. Commonly, such a consciousness would be described as a thought form. Homunculus is an old term for it, and sometimes they're also called golems. But basically one can create, in effect, an astral entity which serves a particular purpose. Often they're created as guardians. In fact, the world's oldest magical artifacts relate to exactly this kind of thing. Specifically, a series of wolf skulls found in the cave of Lazare in France, which appear to have been house guardians to a village of Homo erectus who once lived there. So we've been using this kind of thing since long before we were modern humans. So the answer is absolutely. At least within that context, a consciousness can be created. Now, Taz 1507 goes on to say that what he's really asking is not about this sort of limited consciousness that is created to perform a particular task, but whether we can create a freestanding, well-rounded consciousness through magical means. And my answer to that is yes, I think we can. And I would point out a well-known phenomenon that is encountered particularly by authors who, in working with characters, often find those characters take on a life of their own, which frequently will take them to places the author had not actually intended. And I think that this is a species of the same thing. It's not done magically exactly, though in the amount of energy and focus that the authors put into the creation of the characters, you might say that it is in fact done magically because it is very much the same thing. And those sorts of characters, those sorts of consciousness can be very well developed. So I would say yes, when we create this kind of astral entity, it can be very well developed. Now, what it does, what it is, depends in large measure on how it's created and what it's intended to do, and how well-rounded it is, how deep its consciousness is, in many ways depends on how it's put together. But the basic answer, I would say, is yes. Now, Taz 1507 goes on to ask, in my opinion, exactly what consciousness is. And my answer to this actually required a little bit of thought, somewhat more so than many questions. And the answer I finally came up with is that I think that consciousness, at least as far as this question goes, refers to anything that has enough internal coherence to constitute a vantage point for deity to view and interact with the world in a spiritual sense. And all consciousness ultimately is deity in various different branches that we think of as monads, souls, parallel lives, etc. So my answer is that anything can be a point of consciousness for deity if it has enough internal cohesion to function in that way. And anything that exists can be a point of limited interaction for deity in the physical world because all things that exist are deity. Now, when we talk about creating a consciousness, what we're really talking about is merely arranging what already exists. And I think that we do this in an unconscious manner on a regular basis, which is usually what I do say about magic. Certainly people who work with writing, with the creation of characters and stories and plots, I think regularly do, in a manner of speaking, create limited consciousnesses and sometimes unlimited ones. And I definitely do tend to feel that literary characters, as well as intentionally created thought forms, do have their own existence, which after the creation in many ways can be independent of the creator. And this sort of entity either can be programmed to dissolve when its task is finished, or it can go on indefinitely. And I think that the entity which is gathered in that consciousness will go on as any other spirit does to subsequent incarnations and will have its own life force that will carry it forward. Now, to add to this, one of my points of view, which is a Corellian teaching, is that souls split constantly all the time. So when we create an entity such as this, it could be argued that we're actually merely splitting off a part of ourselves, because we do this constantly also in creating parallel lifetimes, and in souls branching in different directions to experience different lessons that life has to learn. So those are my thoughts on that, and until next time, may you blessed be.